You're with Julian on the Brown Notes, and Sheeran versus Geldof in defence of Do They Know It's Christmas, which has continually come under fire by people for being condescending towards Africans due to its lyrics being clumsy. Now, if you don't know the story, Do They Know It's Christmas was basically the brainchild of Sheeran and Bob Geldof, who had seen a TV documentary which had been an enormously impactful one in the UK around 1984 about the children mainly, but also the mass starvations, the worst famine event in Ethiopians' history at that point, and certainly for that century, which is mainly down to two elements, drought and civil war. And there was this horrific part of the documentary where there was a nurse, I think from the UK, who basically had to choose, because of the amount of food available, which of the children would be fed and live and which would die, which is pretty shocking stuff. So Sheeran and Bob Geldof wrote this song on a beer mat, not expecting people to be debunking the lyrics 40 years later, and rushed it through before Christmas. It came out on the 7th of December, and it sold the fastest selling single of all time in the UK, 1 million copies in the first week. It's gone up to globally nearly 12 million copies, and it was the biggest selling song in UK history until that god-awful Candle in the Wind post-Diana track. It should have been number one in America, and it's bizarre because it outsold the number one 4-1, but only made the top 10, barely, because they use radio airplay, which is ridiculous. It's been criticised for what has been described as its colonial Western-centric viewpoint, and has also been criticised for its condescending stereotypical descriptions of Africa. Now, Ed Sheeran has come out because every 10 years they re-release a song, and this time they've re-released a version that contains all the other versions. And he's included, and he said that he would refuse permission for his vocals had he been asked, saying his opinion had changed. He shared a post by British Ghanaian vocalist Fuse ODG saying the song perpetuated damaging stereotypes that stifle Africa's economic growth, tourism and investment, ultimately costing the content trillions and destroying its dignity and pride. Geldof came back in the Times rallying against abstract wealthy world arguments, saying that the trust's funds are providing food for those still starving. This little pop song has kept, which he's called one of the worst songs ever written, himself, has kept millions of people alive. Why would Band-Aid scrap feeding thousands of children dependent on us for a meal? Why not keep doing that? Because of an abstract wealthy world argument, regardless of its legitimacy. There are 600 million hungry people in the world, 300 of those are in Africa. We wish it was not this way, but it is. We can help some of them, and we will continue. The wealthy world argument is the fact that the people complaining aren't the people. You're not going to go to a starving person in Africa and say, and they're going to tell you, I'm not going to take the food off of you because the lyrics to that song are a bit condescending. I mean, what planet are these people on? It is the notion that the people that make these things, one of the clips I didn't read out, it says like Twitter activists. People that have been to university, often in the West, or are actually Westerners, making decisions for people that are starving because they don't feel that the lyrics are particularly right on now, is just bollocks. I'm sorry, but it is absolutely that saying that the lyrics to Do They Know It's Christmas are condescending towards Africans. What are you doing? Being a Twitter activist that went to university in the West criticising those people getting food from a song which was never intended to be as successful as it was, that people will be going through their lyrics 40 years later that they wrote in the space of a couple of days. And to complain about specific lyrics in this song, like there won't be snow in Africa this year, and say, well, actually, there's lots of different environments in Africa, and Yeah, but this song was specifically about a famine brought on by drought. Now, this song was never written for the people of Africa. It was written for the people of UK, mainly white UK people that buy records, to inspire them through guilt or shame to give money to buy food for people that were starving. It was never written to be a encyclopedic right-on view of the continent of Africa. In fact, they even changed the lyric that contained the word Ethiopia to Africa just because it scanned better. It was specifically about a drought in Africa. So saying, oh, well, there's lots of lushness in Ethiopia. There wasn't during the course of this drought that the song is specifically referring to. It was written for the white British record-buying public, mainly. The people complaining about these things are the people that were already safe. It's just this eternal cynicism where I suspect every time anyone does anything good, like Live Aid, which this led to, which generated like $250 million US for the famine in Africa over those concerts. People want to tear it down. And I suspect the reason that gets so much credence in the press is if people banding together to do something out of their goodness of their hearts to help other people is actually allowed to flourish, maybe they would look inward at how they can help people in their own countries, and that could be a problem if people become a little bit more caring in the UK or America or Australia. Maybe that is kind of the issue why these notions get so promoted. Why not celebrate like the enormous coming together, this very small thing, which was just over a week of two guys writing a song, getting a load of their friends together and recording a music video, which then went on to inspire hundreds of millions of dollars of relief going to starving children in Africa. And generated a lot more on top of that. The impact of Live Aid on famine relief has been debated for years. One aid relief worker stated that following the publicity generated by the concert, humanitarian concern is now at the centre of foreign policy for Western governments. Geldof said, "We took an issue that was nowhere on the political agenda and were able to address the intellectual absurdity and moral repulsion of people dying for want of food in a world full of surplus." Now, there were enormous failures, but there are enormous failures every day in capitalism. We don't hold to the same standard as when anyone tries to do something good. Such as this, the organisers of Live Aid tried to run efforts directly, channeling millions of pounds into NGOs in Ethiopia. It's alleged that much of this went to the Ethiopian government, a regime the UK Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher had opposed. It also alleged some funds were spent on guns, although the BBC World Service Programme assignment reported in March 2010 that the funds had been diverted. The BBC Editorial Complaints Unit later found there was no evidence to support the fact that these funds had been diverted. British Ambassador to Ethiopia wrote on his website that the diversion of aid related to a tiny proportion that was supplied by some NGOs to rebel-held areas. Now, at the time, they made out like that all of this hundreds of millions of dollars was going into the civil war effort. None of the money was going into food. But when they come out the other end of it, they say a tiny percentage actually did that. The rest of it did actually go into aid and food. But it was people wanted to believe that it wasn't real. And that was, I remember, people were saying, oh, all this money is going to these people in the Civil War, it's buying guns, and lambasting and trashing Geldof and Mijiur for the whole enterprise. And none of that's true. It was a tiny fraction that actually did that. Why do we hold charity to a higher standard than economic neoliberalism? Like these events, like that one song led to so many other things, such as Live Aid. Even on Live Aid, when Bob Dylan complained that, maybe we could help the farmers out in America, which also generated a lot of controversy, they started Farm Aid, which runs to this day, I believe. It was a yearly event to help farmers in America overcome poverty and mortgage stress. But we have this desire, I think, innate in human beings to want to trash anything like this that was done. And for Ed Sheeran to say, well, the lyrics aren't really that good now because they're a bit condescending. That's not the point, is it?